Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Susan Gold, author of Toxic Family. This one should be interesting. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Kelly, I hope it is interesting because I've listened to all of your episodes leading up to mine, and they were just great. You're doing such a fabulous job.
Well, I've done a really good job of picking some amazing women to have on. So I've been lucky that way that I've had women on with great stories, great books to share, and that just makes it really easy. So my my job is easy, but yeah. So I want to start with talking about your book. So Toxic Family. You actually told me a story before we started recording that about the title that I would love for you to start with that because I want people to understand kind of what your intention with the book was, and how the title maybe doesn't totally speak to that. So tell me what the original title of the book was.
Well, I'm hoping that your audience listening in are going to be so energized to tackle their own memoirs or their own books, because if I can write a book that's called Toxic Family, transforming your childhood trauma into adult freedom, you can do anything. So, so my original title, Kelly, was Magical Illumination, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. I was born into a very chaotic home with five kids. I was smack in the middle with two pseudo adults at the helm. They were doing the best they could, but they brought in their own ancestral traumas, and boy, was it ignited. My father was a physicist genius, but also a Peter Pan and an alcoholic. My mother had a brutal upbringing, and she was soothing with food. And she also, I believe, had a mental illness because her personality could switch on a dime. She could be so loving and just exquisite. And then the next minute, I was being beaten and had no idea why. So, I'm a big manifester. I used to watch Barbara Walters, the interviewer who launched The View, on my belly in my basement on my beanbag and dream of going to New York. I wanted to be like Barbara Walters. So I left my home at 17, the morning after I graduated. And I
Wow.
did end up in New York City at 19 doing an internship out of college. And then again at 21, I got a glitzy job at a very high profile global talent agency called ICM, but they don't pay you a lot. So I picked up a side hustle before side hustles were really chic, training people. And Barbara Walters became my client. And one morning I knocked on Barbara's door and she said, Susan, get in here. What's going on with you? And she got it out of me within moments. I mean, she was a great interview for a reason. She was so highly intuitive and tuned in. And I shared that I had been sexually harassed in the workplace the day before. And she said, I'm coming to work with you and we're going to confront this man together. And I'm like, yeah, no, I think I got it, Barbara. I did confront my boss that day and was promptly fired.
Mm.
And I was newly sober, because I saw the same things coming up in my own life that were demonstrated in my home that I swore I'd never do. And I had just extricated myself from an abusive relationship where the gentleman held the purse strings. I'm embarrassed to say, but that was the truth of it.
Yeah.
And Barbara offered me an assistantship with her then fiance at this big film distribution company he launched. And I was like, Barbara, I can't be an assistant anymore after what I've experienced. So I launched my own talent brokerage firm, matching celebrities to brands. And I had like 2.5 months of cash in the bank and wasn't quite sure how this was all going to work out, but I knew I was going to do it. And by golly, it did. So I went on
Wow.
from there to match celebrities with brands and became
Wow.
known for that. And that led me into producing for television and film. But along the way, I cleaned up from addictive substances, totally clean and sober for decades now, probably before you were born. And then experienced 10 years with clinical depression and learned how to work with that minus any kind of pharmaceutical medications. But had the perfect storm when I woke up to my narcissistic marriage. alleged narcissistic marriage. We'll just use the legalese. And that really woke me up the most. So that's when I started getting the intuitive hit. Yeah, I really have to write that book, don't I? Because I'm going to get SoCal hooey on you, but the re-intuitives told me I had a book to write. And the last one said you have 3 books to write. And I thought, oh, fluff. Before this turns into a library, I think I'll just get going. And it was in 2020 that I started writing. And I was like a bulldog producer. I sat in front of my computer for 15 minutes a day, whether I had something to write or not. And a year later, had the manuscript and thought I was going
Wow.
to self-publish because why wouldn't you? Um, but a very good friend of mine who was a former producing partner, she approached me. She said, I heard through the grapevine you're writing a memoir. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of written, kind of. She goes, send it to me. Oh my gosh, I was so sweating from head to toe for that weekend. And she emailed me Monday morning. She said, I'm publishing this. I'm taking it.
Wow. That's a great story. Well, I started with the title because to me when you said that, it was like you there was so much positivity in like how you framed that. And so the title doesn't sound positive, obviously, but it also draws attention, right? So people want to know more about toxic family, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who can identify with that title, that wording, right? But really your purpose isn't to just tell your horrible story, but to use that experience in your life to help other people in their maybe in their healing journey. Is that kind of tell me about that? Like what so you talked about writing it, but like what was your real, well, I haven't said this in a while in my show, so I'm gonna say, remind people who are listening that the purpose for the title of my podcast, Beyond the Bestseller, is that women write books for, the guests that I'm having on have a message they want to share. So it's not just about selling a million copies, becoming a bestseller, but it's about getting that message out there. So back to my question, what was that message that you wanted to share with people, and how did you want to help people through writing your story? And I'm sure it was also very traumatic writing your story, and going back through your experiences. So why did you go through that for the reader's benefit?
Yeah, I asked that myself many times. And I knew I was savvy enough to know that a book for me was a PR platform. That's what it felt like. That's why I kicked it under the carpet for so many years. I didn't want to go through that exercise, knowing what I knew. But I just had this urge, and I was encouraged from the outside, um, that this was going to be powerful for other people. And I thought, why? My story's not really that different, is it? And I found, yes, it's a little bit different
Sure.
than most people's stories. And you're also going to be an incredible inspiration to others. And I thought, really? But I've always sort of been that. I'm a huge super empath. I can feel others' traumas, and that served me really well in my job. I convinced well-known household names to do projects that they would have never otherwise considered. And that was part of my job as a producer. And so I knew that I could ultimately help others who would look at me and go, you did what? And then you did what? And how did you do that? I'm a little girl from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Like the chances of me getting out, going to New York City, becoming successful, and primarily working for myself my whole career, and then on to LA, that doesn't happen. It
Yeah.
happens. It happens if you're willing to step up and take risks and ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know when you first said that you started your company, how old were you? Was that in your early 20s?
I was 25 years old.
Oh my gosh.
I was living in my first studio apartment all on my own. in New York City. I mean, you had to get down on hands and knees and look up between the buildings to see what was going on in the sky. And that's how you figured out what to wear. But yeah, I was determined. And I got matched with Donnie Deutsch, who's a bit of a host and icon now. But back then he was running his dad's ad agency. And he said, can you get me Andy Warhol for the tri-state Pontiac dealers? I'm like, I don't know, I'll try. And back then we didn't have the communication tools that are so abundant today. So when I couldn't get anybody to answer the phone at the factory, I took the subway down there and I knocked on the door, and Fred, Andy's manager, answered. I explained why I was there, and he said, come back tomorrow and I'll let you talk to Andy. And another exercise client found out. She was horrified. She's like, you can't go to the factory. Andy Warhol's dangerous. It's very dangerous there. Don't do it. And I was just determined I was going to make this happen. So knocked on the door, sat in the foyer, sweating bullets, and these double wooden doors opened, and it was a dark room. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is going to happen to me now? And there was a pin spotlight coming down on Andy's platinum hair that went 17 different directions, and he was scribbling with colored pencils. I shouldn't say that because he's an amazing modern art master, right? But these three pugs, those dogs with the smushed up faces, they were running around the studio. Well, in I go, and I launched my spiel, and I'm talking about the commercial. He's not making eye contact. It's a dial tone, but I can feel his isolation, and I can feel his desire for recognition, like clear as a bell. And I'm seeing him pick up his dogs like they're little babies. So precious. He loved those dogs. And I knew that. And finally, he looks up at me and he goes, now, really, why should I do this? That really nasty. I was taken aback. I took a breath, and then I heard it. And I said, because you can have the dogs in the shot with you. And I didn't know if that was true or not. I just, like, I had nothing to lose at that point. And he looked at me and he looked at the dogs, and he paused and he said, okay, I'll do it. And like that was the deal that launched my career. I became known for attaching talent that would never do things to projects
Wow.
because I wasn't afraid, to use that spidey sense that we all have that's starting to be uncovered. And that's one of the things that I help people with now. And I shared in my book, once we are able to really uncover our hearts, and with respect, I hate that darn word mindset, because yes, we have brilliant minds, especially we women, brilliant minds, but the hearts are really what drives everything. The love and the success and the engagement and the compassion you feel for your fellow human beings. And once I really got that and got the beauty of my heart inside, that shifted my whole reality, my whole paradigm. And that's another thing that I teach through my experience, really how to connect with that.
So how did you have such, I don't know, such wisdom at 25 years old? I mean, how did you know, like, I mean, obviously there was just like kind of a natural skill set. And you said, we all maybe have that bit of spidey sense or whatever, but like, how did you really tap into that so young?
I had it when I was a kid. I was almost, well, I was telepathic. I could get complete sentences and it would come spouting out, and the adults in the room did not appreciate it. Let's just leave it there. So I tucked that into a compartment and shoved it down. And I could feel it clearly, but I would push it away. So I would know intuitively, like I know your listener. I can feel them right now going, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I've had that too, come to think of it. Like we are highly psychic, intuitive beings, but we've just been trained out of it. And that's another thing I learned writing and talking about a book titled Toxic Family, because ultimately it's not just within our ancestry, it's within most systems that we are engaging in on a regular basis. So all that is trained out of us. All that beautiful empathy and compassion and knowing. And I just, after the experience I had at 25, and I was clean for probably, well, not even 90 days, but I knew, oh, I can't go back in that patriarchal system and serve that. I just can't do that. I'm going to have to find another way. And if it works, it works. And I was pretty determined back then. I was pretty much like a, steamroller. I've let some of that go now, thank goodness. But I allow things to happen. But yeah, I'm also a super manifester. You don't visualize Barbara Walters and then end up in our living room.
You know what's funny? I have to tell you this. You know how often I think of Barbara Walters? Probably almost never. I mean, like, yeah, you hear the name, whatever. But I was honestly thinking of Barbara Walters this morning. I I don't know. So the second you said Barbara Walters, I'm like, that is so weird. Like I had thoughts of Barbara Walters when I was getting ready this morning, and I don't even know why. I couldn't tell you, but as soon as you said something, I was like, I guess my mind knew where this conversation was going.
I think so. Yeah.
And then when you talked about actually working directly with her, I'm like, man, my mind must have like been already a couple steps ahead as I was preparing for my day today. Um, I believe in manifesting too. I just also don't know. I don't understand why it works, but I I do believe in it. Like, so I don't know what is it about manifesting that brings things together. Like what is it that makes that happen?
I believe it's frequency and vibration. It's energetic, and we are frequency beings. We are vibrational. We have electricity, electrons. And when you put your focus on something, envision it, feel it, honestly, it's bound to manifest if you really allow yourself to feel it. And it's one of our incredible abilities as human beings. And we have been so trained out of it and distracted away from it and told that in order to manifest, you need to do this and this and this, and this is the process and this is the order. No wonder you can't do it. Like it's so regimental and judgmental. I remember being in the midst of that divorce from the alleged narcissist and going to the kitchen window, and he wanted to take the retirement account, mine, because he hadn't contributed to one up to that
Mm-hmm.
point, and more information than you need to know, but they're only entitled to up to the marriage date if you can prove it. Well, I had to have a forensic accounting, and I literally looked out my kitchen window, looked at the tree, and go, if this doesn't stop now, I'm flipping quitting. And the phone rang. It's my financial planner saying they put one of the juniors on it, and they have a whole forensic accounting leading up to what was in the fund up until the point of the marriage. And they really helped me out. But that's manifesting, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So I practice miracle morning, and there's a part of that that's like the visualization piece. So I guess I translated that to like manifesting, which kind of, I mean, it's similar, right? And yeah, I've just had that experience over the last few weeks where I have practiced the visualization piece, and then like later in my day, things came together that it felt like were things I hadn't even, not out of my control, but like things I hadn't done something to make happen, right? And then it happened, and I was like, this is weird. Like it's I don't know if it's anyway. So I have felt the power of that, and also like I always go, I don't get it. I don't understand this because I don't know. It's just not my background, the way that I was, raised, and my, the belief systems that were created in it's just very different from that, right? But anyways, so I totally am on the same page about that. I believe in it. And I don't know about the energy, the vibration. That's just not my world, but like I do believe in it. So, um, Well, so tell me about the book that you wrote, and your process. And you said it took a year to write it, which is that's pretty good. I mean, that's a good timeline for sitting down and getting everything out that you want to, getting your message out. Um, but how did you approach that process as far as um how did you know how to tell your story and how to organize those thoughts and to get those out into that final version of your book?
Well, unlike many, I actually was never considered myself a writer or a good writer for that matter. And one day, and I helped launch Fox News Channel. And one day in the newsroom, one of the senior producers goes, "If anybody needs to know how to write, go to Gold. She knows what she's doing." I was like, "What? I don't know." So, but also from my experience in recovery from, addictions, I was used to getting up and telling my story. And when I was a little girl, one of the things that I loved, my grandmother had a boarding house down at the Jersey Shore, and there were rockers everywhere. And I got the people to tell their stories. I loved listening to their stories. So, write a book. Okay. Write a script. Okay. Write this news intro. Okay. Write this storyline for the show segment. Okay. I just jump in and I do these things. I don't have any letters behind my name. I did go to college, but for nothing like I did as a
Yeah.
professional. I mean, nothing like that. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to try it. And so I literally sat down and just 15 minutes, and I sent it to a friend of mine who's had a book. She's been with a group for years and been writing the memoir. And she's like, she says, she gives me the feedback and I'm appreciative and she's got some good points. But I'm like, yeah, she never had a book published. I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to learn from the experience. And I was a little gun shy sending it to my former producing partner, who's a New York Times best-selling publisher. I thought, oh my God. But, for her to like read it and want to publish it immediately, I'm doing something right. And so are your writing group people, and so are the people that listen to the podcast. We are way more capable, but we've been trained into this self-judgment and criticism and perfection.
Mhm.
And I really see it like in my son's generation. He's 20, graduated from college in 3 years with a double minor and major, got a career job right out of college. But geez, the perfectionism. I'm just kind of, maybe I'm silly, but I just say, go for it. Stop the judgment, just try it. And so
Yeah.
that was my process.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. So for people who maybe may or may not have a toxic family, but maybe have a story they want to share, memoir type book they want to write, what would you recommend for them and how to get started?
Yeah, I would say free flow and leave the judgment behind. I would say go into your heart, breathe from your heart, and speak from your heart. Let the words spill onto the page. Even though I was hoping I would have one of those channeled experiences, I didn't. I was like very cognitive, and some of this was quite painful to get back on paper. And some of it I wondered, do you really want to share this like publicly? Like my college boyfriend had no idea where I came from. And people I had gone to high school had no idea. They were all stunned, when they found out about the book and read it. But I would say just sit down and watch the self-judgment and say, thank you for sharing, and just continue on with the action. And every time that comes up, that's your mantra. That's your
Mm,
medicine mantra, because you do have a message that's important to get out. And yes, your story is important. And I say, publish it yourself or get it published. Don't put it in the closet. Don't do it, because we need you. We need your voice now. People are hurting. There's a lot of pain around the globe, and they need your human voice to share your
yeah.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's easier said than done. I think like the constant reminder, because I am such a self-censor. I don't know the word there, but like when I'm writing, it's constant censorship. Like I will not allow my true thoughts to come out, even like when I'm journaling. I mean, I have to like really, really push through that. So I'm sure that that is something for a lot of people, especially when you've dealt with, um, the tragic things in your life that you kind of want to hide parts of that. You don't want to share everything, but I think it is important to, you can always go back after the first draft and then take things out if it doesn't fit the, the larger story that you're trying to share. But to really just be true to yourself. I like that. Like breathe through your heart, get it out there. So I love that, Susan. Well, I am going to link to the book in the show notes, but how else can people get in touch with you or find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. And my website is susangold.us. And if you're thinking about publishing a book or having it published, a website is necessary because you need to do your own marketing once it gets out. And for those of you that are interested in what I do, which is opening your heart and helping you come from your inner self versus the outside in, which is absolutely crucial when you're writing. I have lots of free tools, lots of free courses, a grounding activation session where if you're just spinning and you can't get anywhere, we just spend 30 minutes and I ground you. And there's other offerings there. I also have a YouTube channel and it's at Susan Gold is Magical, where weekly I offer messages of inspiration for transformation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Susan. I think your message is really powerful for those who just need to kind of push through some things in their lives and focus on tell me the original title again. Magical
Illumination.
Illumination. Yes. All right. Well, remember that if you're looking for the book, it's called Toxic Family, but will help you push through to the magical illumination. Thanks, Susan. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
For a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey, join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com.